Hi everyone, today we are going to talk about downloading and using Reaper for the reasons we want to use it for. This is for people using a Mac computer. Juice is making a similar video for those using a PC. Though with Reaper, the two things are relatively similar. There's just some differences in the way plugins work and that sort of thing. And we'll get that in a minute. Now, there's lots of tutorials out there on Reaper, but the first thing you want to do, of course, to use Reaper is download it. So if I just Google Reaper, well, for me, that's the first thing that comes up. But reaper.fm is the website. This takes me, my little cached version takes me directly to the downloads page, but this would take you to the main page. So Reaper FM is what you want to type up in there. And so if I scroll down just a little bit on the downloads page, I see a lot of different versions. Over on the left hand side there's Windows versions, and the right hand side there's Mac versions. If you have a Mac, you want to download the one that's appropriate for you. I suggest the 64-bit version in general. Reaper, this one's for OS X to OS 10.14. This last one is only for 10.15 or Catalina. If you don't know what version of your operating system you have, you just go up here and go to About This Mac, and this should tell you right at the top what version you have. Embarrassingly, I still have El Capitan because I'm trying to keep some. I'm kind of trying to keep some old software dreams alive. So I have not updated my OS in a little while. So you just download it, install it. That's how you do. It's pretty straightforward installing a program. And let anybody who is having difficulty with that should reach out to somebody. So once that's downloaded and installed, I've got it of course in my applications folder. But because I'll be using this a lot, I've also put it into my dock by just dragging the icon for Reaper down into my dock. So now I can just start Reaper from here, and you'll see this will take a moment to load up. And when you first start it up, you'll get all these crazy windows. New version notification. I'm not going to do that yet. This little guiltware window that tells you Reaper is not free. You have 60 days in which to use it for free. After that, you're ethically asked to pay for it and pay for a license. But in general, Reaper will function perpetually. It's all based on the honor system. So if you feel like once you used it like for 10,000 hours, you might want to consider paying the $30. I've done this several times actually already. I've purchased several licenses. I haven't on this computer yet, but yeah, you can use it no matter what. So when you first open Reaper, you'll see this window. This window, the default window is split into two parts. This is kind of the track edit section up here, and this is the mixer section down here. And you can see here we have what looks like, kind of emulates what looks like on a mixing board. We have a kind of a fader. You have a mute button, a solo button. This right now is just the master output. And we don't have any other tracks in here, meaning we don't have any other mixing channels, and we don't see tracks up here. So if we want to insert a track, we go up to this menu up here, go to track, insert new track, or Command T on a Mac. And then we get a track basically. This over here on the left here is the track control panel, and this over here is kind of the timeline. You can see up here there's minutes and seconds on the bottom, and then beats and measures on the top. So it displays on the timeline, it displays both minutes and seconds, beats and measures, and you can see you can set your tempo, down here, and that kind of changes the relationship. If I change that to 100, you see the minutes and seconds are in a different relationship. But let's change that back to 120. So what we want to really get to the crux of here are the important things you're going to need to use to use Reaper to do live performances. And the reason we're going in such detail in this tutorial is that eventually we want to be able to use a plugin, and because Reaper, a particular plugin that allows for streaming of high quality audio back and forth between players, so we can get around the zoom problems. And the reason I'm focusing in on Reaper is because it is a freeware. It's fairly easy to download, easy to access. There's not too much rigmarole with downloading and installing. However, it is a very flexible and versatile software, it also has a lot of caveats, a lot of easy ways to mess up and hit the wrong buttons. So I'm hoping to just walk you through how to just hit the right buttons in Reaper. So this here is called the track control panel, this little area that's now highlighted over here. The track control panel has several aspects to it, and in fact, if I move my cursor in Reaper, depending on where it sits, it changes the context. It's called a contextual cursor. So if I move it down here, it becomes this little sidebar with the up and down arrows. That allows me to click and drag down, and I can actually, in doing so, I actually reveal some things that are hidden. This is something that's kind of bothering me about the new display in Reaper, is that some of the things you're really going to need to be able to access are initially hidden unless you make the track control panel bigger. And you can see if I move it up and down, more and more stuff kind of gets hidden. That's nice when you've got a lot of tracks and you want to just like be able to see all of your items together, but not so nice if you're trying to get things started. So the first thing we want to do is we need to have a track that we can record or be transmitting our audio through. So we want to essentially record enable this track. Eventually this is going to be called like the transmit track, but that'll be in the next tutorial. So this tutorial also kind of will simultaneously be teaching you how to record into a track. But right now, what we'll eventually use it for is to actually just transmit audio through a plugin. But in order to do that, we have to know how to get audio into the track. So first of all, if you go to Options and then go down to Preferences, you will see this Reaper Preferences window, and by default it should be, usually it's on Audio and Device. And that's the window you want to see. If you're not in this window, kind of in the sidebar over here, you can go to Audio, Device, and then you're allowed to set your input device and your output device. By default, you see this allow use of different input and output devices. That's not checked by default. That is in mine, but not in yours. And then there's this drop down that allows you to choose your audio input. And right now I'm speaking into the EM USB microphone. So right now I'm going to choose EM USB. That's my Mackie little USB microphone. For you, you'd choose maybe your Shure microphone or whatever audio device you're using, or if you're using like an audio interface, you'd choose that interface. But I'm going to use my microphone. And then if I click allow the use of a different input and output device, then I can use my built-in output as my output device, so I can kind of hear just through my regular computer audio what I'm listening for. So I'm going to hit apply. In Reaper, you always want to hit apply, and then OK, and that closes the window. So now I've gotten the right audio input chosen. That's really important. Reaper accesses your audio resources independently of your system audio, so you want to make sure to do that within Reaper. Even if you've got the right microphone set in your system preferences and your sound settings, Reaper has its own audio settings in its preferences, so you want to make sure that that's done. The second thing you want to do is you want to choose the right input. Now my USB microphone is a mono microphone, and right here this little arrow here is my input source selector. So if I click that, I get this list. It says mono or stereo. If I had a stereo mic, or if I was just using my built-in mic, I could choose stereo, front, left, and right. But in this case, since I'm using a mono mic, I'm going to choose front, left. In audio world, left and right are usually numbered odd and even. You might expect to see input 1 or input 2 instead of, because there's two different inputs. But in the case that there's only two inputs, Reaper kind of automatically assumes it's like a stereo mic situation or a stereo situation, so it labels them left and right, which can be a little confusing in certain circumstances. So that's why I'm choosing left, because it's essentially input 1. So now that we've got the right input selected, I'm gonna go up here. This red button is called the record enable button. If I had multiple tracks, if I hit this button, it means when I hit record down here in my transport, it'll only record onto tracks that are actually record enabled. And you also see when I hit that button, I get this kind of red meter going on, and you can see it's kind of following the contour of my speaking. And that's because it is picking up my USB microphone right now that I'm talking to you with. A few other things that you might want to note about this, the track control panel. So if I am playing something back and I want to mute it, I hit this mute button. This means you won't hear what's in this track if I'm playing back. So if you want to just kind of stop, hearing what's in this track so you can hear what's in the other tracks over it, you want to hit the mute button. Also, inversely, if you want to just hear what's in this track, there's this button, the solo button. That solos it out. That means you don't hear anything else. There's a couple other things. Here's our master volume fader. So if you're playing something back, you can turn the volume up and down. And also notice when I turn that up and down, it's linked with this little thing down here. This is my mixer channel. So you've got two views essentially of the same thing. Here's my track view, and here's my mixer view. And so if I turn this fader up and down, you see it's connected to this track because it's just a different representation of the same thing. And finally, here and here are my panning knobs. If I want to pan this mono channel to the left or to the right, I can do it like that. And then lastly, here's this button. It's called an effects button. This is where you apply effects like reverberation, equalization, other things. This is where we're eventually going to put in some plugins that will help us transmit sound over the internet. But for now, in this tutorial, I'm not too worried about that yet. So the first thing, again, just to repeat, we're going to record enable, and that now sound is going into that channel. Now, if I want to actually hear myself, hear what I'm recording in, I am going to click this. You see it says record monitoring and it says off. By the way, almost everything here, you put your cursor over it, it tells you what it is. So if you kind of forget what things are or get mixed up between, say, your input type and your input source, you can just hover the cursor over it and it just kind of literally tells you what it is. So I put my cursor over here, it says record monitoring, and it says it's off. So I'm going to click it, and now my record monitoring is on. Now you all don't hear the difference there because I'm talking to you through this just general mic, but on my end, and if you do this at home and you've got your mic going, you will suddenly hear yourself through your headphones if you're going through the correct output, you know what I mean? So and as you can also see, suddenly you see all this green metering happening in my master track. That means now what's happening here is being sent out the master so it can be heard. You don't have to have this on when you're recording. Sometimes I don't, depending on how I'm recording. It just depends on the context. But for the purposes of the plugin we're going to use, we're going to need to have it on because this needs to be, the record monitoring needs to be on for it to send sound out the plugin, basically. So, and if I toggle it, if I click it again, it goes to something called auto, and that turns it red. And if I click it again, it turns it back off. And that turns it kind of, you see how it's like not filled in at all. So those are the two things, those are really the main things you're going to need to be able to do what we need to do with this plugin down the road. So I'm going to turn record monitoring back on, and just to demonstrate, I'm actually going to record a track. So now that we've got it record enabled, record monitoring's on, we're getting our meter, I'm going to hit this record button. This actually actively records. And you could see if I had like 3 more tracks here. In fact, by the way, I can just hit Command T to create a couple more tracks. If I don't record enable these tracks, you'll see that it only starts recording audio in the one track, the track that I am trying to record in. So I'm going to now hit stop. I'm going to save all. When you record, you can either delete or save all. And now if I turn off my record monitoring, turn the record enable off, I should say. Now I can just play it back. And you probably don't hear that because, again, your source is my mic right now. But you would hear it if you played yours at home. You should then hear playback. So this is kind of how you just basically set up a track to record in Reaper. Like I said, setting up the track to record in Reaper is the same thing we need to do as to transmit sound to our fellow players in a session that we will be creating to do that with a plugin. But for now, I'm going to leave you with that. Just kind of go through those steps, familiarize yourself with that functionality of Reaper, and yeah, just try to. There are several other tutorials if there's other things you want to find out about Reaper, but for our purposes right now, we've kind of gotten as far as we wanted to. So just to quickly review: options, preferences. Make sure we've selected our audio import source, so that for you might be your Shure mic or your audio interface. Hit apply. Okay. Make sure we're selecting the right input. So if it's your interface and you're plugged into channel 1, you want to make sure to select channel 1. Or if you've just got like one of these type direct USB types of mics, you probably just want to go into the front left is what it says. So and then we want to record enable, and we also want to make sure we turn on record monitoring. And again, you can see I just toggled it off. Turn on record monitoring. And then at that point, you'll actually be ready for the next step of putting a plugin in that allows you to transmit stuff. All right. I hope you enjoyed this. And I'm going to stop.